What's up, YouTube? It's Seraphim, back at it again with another video. Today we're watching four true Home Alone horror stories animated. There's going to be a lot of animated videos in the coming weeks that I'm going to be posting. Uh, but yeah, nothing more, nothing less. Let's get right into the video.
16 when my parents left me alone overnight for the first time. My older sister had gotten into some serious trouble at her college 3 states away. My parents got the call around 3 in the afternoon and were on the road by 4. Said they'd be back by tomorrow night at the latest. I'd never been alone in the house overnight before. We lived in a coastal area where the nearest neighbor was a quarter mile down the road. Around 8:30 that evening, a storm rolled in with heavy rain and wind rattling the windows. I was in the living room watching TV when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I went to the front door and looked through the peephole. A girl, maybe around 20, was standing on the porch holding a bag of takeout. She was soaking with rain dripping off her jacket. I opened the door but kept the screen door locked between us and asked what she needed. She said she had a delivery for someone and read off a name I didn't recognize. I told her she had the wrong house. She looked confused, checked her phone, and insisted this was the address she'd been given. I said sorry and told her to call them and figure it out. She nodded but didn't leave. She said the weather was awful and asked if she could wait inside until it cleared up a bit. I told her there was a motel about a mile down the road where she could wait. Her face changed entirely. The puppy face disappeared, and anger took over. She asked why I couldn't just let her in for a few minutes, that it was pouring, and she was freezing. I told her my parents weren't home, and I wasn't allowed to let strangers inside. She went quiet for a second, then simply turned and walked back to her car in the rain. I watched her get in a small sedan and drive away, then closed the door and locked it. Something about the whole thing felt off. I realized I'd made a mistake telling her I was all by myself. I went back to the living room but couldn't focus on the TV. I was hyper aware of the smallest movement around me. Less than an hour later, a faint thud started echoing from the back of the house. I got up, went to the kitchen, and looked out the window. A man was standing in the backyard, donning a black raincoat. He was tall, maybe in his 30s, and was trying to peek into the house. My heart started pounding. I ducked out of his direct line of sight and watched him move around. He walked past the back door, stopped, and knocked. I didn't move or answer. He knocked again and called out, asking if anyone was home, that he was looking for his daughter. He said she'd come to this address for a delivery and hadn't come home yet. I stayed silent. He tried the door handle, but it was locked. He moved on, walking around the side of the house. The motion sensor lights started turning on, one by one, tracking his path as he circled the property. I realized what was happening. I immediately went back to the living room, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. I told the dispatcher everything. She told me to stay on the line, and that officers were on their way. While I was on the phone, I heard more noises at the back door again. I looked through the kitchen doorway. The girl was back and was trying the handle. Suddenly, she picked a stone and hurled it at the window. The small window next to the back door exploded inward, and I saw the man's hand reach through, feeling for the lock. I ran upstairs, into the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I pressed my back against it and kept the phone to my ear. The dispatcher was asking if I was okay. I whispered that they'd broken down a window and were trying to get inside. I could hear them move downstairs. They were checking the drawers and cabinets. The man's voice told the girl to check upstairs. My heart nearly stopped breathing. She was walking up the stairs and stopped right outside the bathroom door. The handle turned but didn't open. The dispatcher told me to lay low and that officers were 2 minutes away. She kicked the door hard. The frame cracked but held. Right then, sirens started wailing in the distance, getting louder. The footsteps retreated fast. I heard them running back downstairs. The back door slammed, and a car engine started. Soon, an office knocked at the bathroom door. They asked if I was okay and searched the property with flashlights. They found footprints in the mud near the back door, broken glass in the kitchen, and fresh tire marks in the driveway. But the girl and the man were gone. One officer asked what the girl looked like. I described her. He said there had been similar incidents in other coastal towns. My parents got back the next night. I told them everything. They were furious that they left me alone and said they would never have gone if they'd known something like this could happen. They installed a security system the following week with cameras on every door, motion sensors, and alarms. The police never found them. I wonder how many houses they tried before mine. How many people let the girl inside because she seemed harmless. Because it was raining and she was young and alone. How many people couldn't call 911 in time? I got lucky. I know that. If I'd hesitated even a few minutes longer, if I'd felt guilty enough to let her wait inside, if I hadn't lied about my parents being close, maybe I wouldn't have lived to tell the tale.
That right there, he did good. He did good. He did good. I'm saying, just like, based off of that, sometimes you can't trust it. I'm glad his parents said, don't let no one in the house. That shit crazy. It's real crazy. That's just crazy.
I was 14 when my dad got transferred for work at a plant 2 hours from where we lived my whole life. We packed up everything in July and moved into a small cottage about 10 minutes from the beach. The house was old, but nice, with wood floors and big windows facing the water. We'd only been there 3 weeks when it happened. My parents had to drive out of state to visit my grandmother in the hospital. They didn't want to leave me alone, but I insisted I'd be fine. I was 13, not a little kid. Plus we had Bruno, our German Shepherd mix. He was protective and alert. I felt safe with him around. They left around 4 in the afternoon and left me money for pizza and a list of emergency numbers on the fridge. I spent the first couple hours watching TV in the living room. Bruno was on the couch next to me, half asleep. Around 7:30, Bruno's head lifted and his ears went up. He started that low growl he did when something was wrong. I muted the TV and listened. At first I didn't hear anything, but then I caught a soft sound from the kitchen, like a drawer being opened and closed. My stomach tightened. I got up slowly and walked toward the kitchen doorway. Bruno followed, still growling. The back porch light was on, but I was sure I'd turned it off hours back. I stood there trying to convince myself I was wrong, that maybe I had turned it on and forgotten, but I knew I hadn't. Bruno's growl got louder. He was staring at the kitchen with his body tense. I took a step forward and looked around the corner. The back door was closed and everything looked normal. But something felt off. One of the kitchen drawers wasn't closed all the way, just slightly open, like someone had looked inside and pushed it shut but missed. I backed away from the kitchen slowly and grabbed Bruno's collar, pulling him with me toward the basement door. I got us both down the stairs as quietly as possible, into the small junk closet, and locked the door behind us. I pulled out my phone and tried calling my parents. They didn't answer. They were probably in the hospital, where phones had to be on silent mode. I texted them what was happening with shaking hands, then called 911. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone might be in my house, that I was hiding in the basement closet with my dog, and that my parents were out of town. She told me to stay where I was and that officers were on their way. She asked if I could hear anyone moving around. I listened. At first there was silence, but then I heard footsteps above us, in the study. I thought it moved toward the front of the house. The dispatcher stayed on the line and kept asking if I was okay. I could barely answer. The footsteps came back and stopped at the top of the basement stairs. The door opened slowly. I held my breath. Bruno went completely still beside me. The footsteps came down the stairs and stopped at the bottom. I could hear them breathing. They were standing right outside the closet door. A man's voice came through the door. He said he knew I was in there and that he could hear my dog. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. He tried the door handle, but it didn't open. He said I should just open the door and give him whatever valuables were in the house. Said he was hungry and didn't want any trouble. Just needed some cash and electronics. The dispatcher was still on the line, listening. She told me not to engage, so I stayed silent. The man tried the handle again, harder this time. I screamed and told him I was on the phone with 911 and that the police were already on their way. He went silent. Then I heard him run up the stairs and through the house. The dispatcher asked if he was gone. I said I thought so, but wasn't sure. She told me to stay in the closet until the officers arrived. I sat there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 8 or 9 minutes. Finally, I heard sirens and voices upstairs calling out that it was the police. I came out of the closet with Bruno right beside me. 2 officers were upstairs. They asked if I was hurt, and I said no. They searched the entire house and found the back door unlocked. There were muddy footprints through the kitchen and into the living room. One officer said the guy probably thought the house was empty and broke in. Then realized someone was home when he heard the TV or Bruno. But instead of leaving immediately, he looked around and opened drawers. By the time I noticed him, he'd probably been inside for several minutes. The officers called a neighbor whose number was on the emergency list my parents left. Mrs. Smith, an older woman who lived 3 houses down, came over immediately and said I could stay with her until my parents got back. I packed a bag, took Bruno, and left with Mrs. Smith. My parents got home around 2 in the morning and came straight to Mrs. Smith's house. My mom was crying before she even got through the door. They filed a police report the next day and got better locks installed. My grandmother recovered eventually and came home from the hospital a few weeks later. But the house never felt the same after that. I couldn't be alone there anymore. Even during the day, I'd feel uneasy. At night it was worse. Every sound made me jump. We lived there another 1.5 years before my dad got transferred again. I was relieved when we moved. But I still check every door twice before going to bed. Still can't shake the memory of sitting in that closet, hearing footsteps come down the basement stairs, and hearing that voice telling me to open the door.
Wawa's $5 Big Breakfast Deal gets you any sizzly, any coffee, and a hash brown for $5. Gotta have a Wawa.
Coach presents Leathers to Love. Shop leather styles to love at Coach.com.
Because sometimes we feel bad, even when it's for their own good.
Hear something.
I was 18 when my parents left me alone for 4 days. I was old enough to take care of myself. Our house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by trees on 3 sides. The first day was fine. I went to work at the grocery store, came home late, and watched TV until midnight before I fell asleep. On day 2, I noticed a green pickup truck parked on the side of the road near the entrance to our driveway on the way home from my shift. I drove past it and up the driveway, then looked in my rearview mirror. The truck was still there, but by the time I parked and went inside, it was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Someone probably pulled over to check their phone. That night, I heard movement near the side of the house. It could have been an animal or branches scraping in the wind. So, I turned on the porch light and looked out the window, but there was nothing. Slightly shaken, I went to bed but couldn't sleep at all. The next day, I took a leave and kept an eye on the surroundings. But everything seemed normal, like how it had always been. I was eating my supper when I caught a quick flash of something reflective near the tree line, like light catching on glass or metal. I stared at the trees for a whole minute, but couldn't spot any movement. I got up and quickly locked all doors and windows. Then I called my best friend Lena and asked her to come over. I told her I was feeling creeped out being alone in the house. Lena agreed and got there around 10. and having someone else in the house instantly made me feel better. For the next few hours, we sat in the living room with our textbooks. Lena asked if I'd forgotten to pay the electric bill. I told her my parents had taken care of everything before they left. I pulled out my phone and checked the power company's website. There were no reported outages in our area. Suddenly, the sound of the footsteps echoed on the gravel outside. We both froze. The footsteps approached and stopped just outside the back door. We just sat there in the dark listening. A shadow passed across the glass panel of the back door. Someone was out there. Lena grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the garage. We went in through the connecting door and locked it behind us. My car was in the driveway, but my dad's truck was in the garage. We climbed into the truck and locked the doors. Lena called 911 and whispered our address, saying someone was trying to get into the house. The dispatcher told us to stay where we were. Through the small garage window, we could see into the house. The back door opened. A man entered. He was donning a dark hoodie and was of average height. He had his phone out with the flashlight on. He walked through the kitchen slowly and opened a few drawers before moving into the living room, where our textbooks were still spread out on the floor. He stood there for a moment looking at them, then went upstairs. I knew where he was going. My bedroom was the first door at the top of the stairs. We sat in the truck watching. I could literally hear my heartbeat in my ear. Lena was shaking. I couldn't see into my room from where we were, but I could see the light from his phone moving around up there. He was in there for maybe 5 minutes, then came back downstairs and walked into the living room. He stood there for a few seconds before he started cooing my name softly as if he was calling his dog. My stomach turned. He knew who I was and was specifically out to get me. Lena grabbed my hand so hard her nails dug in. I didn't realize we were both sobbing. He called my name again and again. Sometimes he'd sing and laugh. Then he'd get angry and snap. He started throwing things on the floor, and Lena and I nearly jumped out of our skin. This went on for forever until we heard sirens in the distance getting closer. He heard them too. The flashlight went off, and we heard the back door open again. Through the window, we watched him run toward the trees. By the time the police pulled up, he was gone. 2 officers searched the property with flashlights. One of them found him about 100 yards into the woods and brought him back in handcuffs. Another officer came to the garage and knocked on the window, telling us it was safe to come out. My blood turned to ice when I saw who it was. Mr. Carson was our high school janitor, and I saw him almost every day for 4 years. He'd always been friendly and helpful. He had a daughter my age, and often asked how my classes were going and what my plans were. The officer took our statements and told us how Mr. Carson had jimmied the lock.
That is crazy. You can't trust nobody. I know, like, after a traumatic experience like this, you feel like you can't trust anybody. That is ridiculous. You're a janitor? At your school? The janitor? What?
Anne used the breaker box to shut the power off. My parents came home early the next morning. Lena stayed with me until they arrived. We didn't sleep. We just sat in the living room with all the lights on. Mr. Carson was charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and attempted burglary. He took a plea deal, and I didn't have to testify. He's in prison now and won't be out for a few more years. I graduated that spring and went to college out of state. Haven't been back to that house since. What haunts me most is how normal he seemed. How many times I'd walked past him in the hallway without thinking twice. How he'd smiled and waved, and I'd smiled back. Lena and I are still close. We don't talk about that night much, but sometimes it comes up. She says she's glad she was there, and she doesn't want to think about what would have happened if I'd been alone. I don't want to think about it either. But I do. All the time. And it still freaks me out.
I was working at Target on Black Friday 2 years in a row. I worked at Target when I was a young woman aged 19 to 21. This was a while ago now, and I recall that we opened at 6 p.m. on Thanksgiving night. I remember when I first heard that, I thought they were crazy. Nobody wants to work on Thanksgiving, and I didn't think that people wanted to go shopping on Thanksgiving either. They should be with their families. I remember that beforehand I said that, and my manager said that we would all spend time with our work family. I thought that was cheesy, but to be honest, it did end up being kind of fun working on Thanksgiving. Plus, I got paid time and a half. The first year went pretty smooth. We had tons of employees working, and I was at the checkouts most of the time as a cashier. The second year, I knew more of what to expect. I was working basically almost an overnight shift this time, from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. We stayed open all night, and 3 a.m. was a really weird time to get off, as I had only worked until midnight the previous year. I wondered how busy the store would be in those overnight hours, and spoiler alert, it was busy. Very busy. I remember all of us cashiers got to our check lanes before the store opened at 6 p.m. We were using every single lane, and I mean every one. From the time we opened at 6 o'clock, I saw the large crowd of people enter the store. Some of them were even running. Very quickly, people mostly went to the electronics department, and before long, there were customers entering all the checkout lines, including my own. I got busy ringing up customer after customer. It went by pretty fast just because of how busy we were. I remember that at one point, a sort of distinct-looking man came to my checkout. I don't remember what he got, but he had glasses, short dark hair, and was wearing a blue jacket. Things went normal, and I only remembered him because he checked out in my line again like an hour later. I was like, wait, didn't this guy check out in my line before? I didn't say anything though, and soon he was gone again. As I kept working, soon it got later and later. The store remained just as busy as people were literally everywhere. It was a steady flow of people through my checkout. Then, maybe 2 hours later, the man was in my line again. I remember he asked me how my night was going and what time I got off. I dismissed it as friendly chit-chat and answered him. I mentioned how I had seen him before, and he simply said something like, I have a lot of shopping to do. I was just like, oh, okay, but I didn't think until later how it didn't make much sense. Why not get all the stuff at once? And why was he always in my line, as there were literally almost 30 others to choose from? Soon, though, I sort of forgot about it as I checked out other customers.
Creep. He's a creep. That's what he is. He's a creep. He went in her line 3 different times. 3 different times. Like, this is crazy. Why? Why do you gotta be a creep? Why you gotta be a weirdo? Why you worry about what time she get off? Like, she's not even thinking about anything for real, because she's like, oh, I'm working. It's just another customer. She's not thinking about anything like crazy. And it be the people that don't expect this shit to happen. It happens to. That's tough.
Then it was time for my break. I went to the front of the store and through the employees-only doors towards the break room. There was a number of other people in there, including my best friend at work, another girl named Kayla, who was around my age. I sat next to her and talked with her about how her shift was going. Kayla was not a cashier, but worked in the sales floor mainly in soft lines. She told me that it was crazy out on the floor. Then she said that there was this creepy guy who she had reported. Apparently, a guy came up to her and started talking to her, asking her where stuff was. She helped him at first, but then he started asking her weird questions and wouldn't let her go away. He kept asking her stuff and sort of following her around. His questions got inappropriate, and she went over to a manager and reported the guy. She said that when she went to report him, he ran away, and was not sure if he had left the store or if he was still in there. It was hard to know because the store was literally packed, and Targets are also pretty large. I felt bad for Kayla to deal with such a creep. It reminded me of the man I kept seeing in the check lane. When I told her about him, we asked each other what the guy looked like, and we realized that it was the same guy. I now felt even more weirded out by this man. I hoped that I would not see him again, and that he would not go through my line anymore. Soon after, I went back out, as well as Kayla. I only had a few hours left, as did she. So I continued with checking out customers. About another hour later, I saw the man once more. He was in my line, but it wasn't his turn yet. I was at a different check lane now, but here he was, in my line once again. As soon as I saw him, our eyes locked for a moment. He must have sensed the different look on my face now that I knew he was a creep. I thought that the managers might be looking for him after he harassed Kayla, so I took out my walkie and I radioed in, "Can I get a GSTL to check lane 20? As soon as I said that, I saw the guy leave his place in line and start quickly walking away. By the time the manager got to me, the guy was long gone. I reported what happened, and the manager was trying to find the guy, but obviously had 100 other things to do as well. It was a crazy night with all the shoppers. There was shoplifting to worry about and just general tasks. And any other night, this guy would have been kicked out of the store already. My manager said that he would look for the guy and walked off in the direction that he went. I hoped that he would find him, but I didn't get my hopes up too much. I was just glad that he was out of my line, and I continued with my work. For the last few hours of my shift, I didn't see the guy. The store stayed very busy into the wee hours of the morning. At 3 a.m., the store was still packed, which was a crazy sight. I was finally done though, and I went up, clocked out, and then left. I started walking to my car at the back end of the parking lot. As I was about halfway there, I noticed a car come up behind me driving the same way that I was walking. I moved over to let it pass. When I did, the car did not go past me as I had expected, so I turned around and looked at it. When I did, my jaw about dropped as I saw the same creepy man behind the wheel. It was this old beat-up car, and the guy was staring at me through those big glasses. I walked faster and hurried to get to my car. When I got there, I went inside and locked the doors and felt a little safer. But the man in his car drove up and parked in a spot like 2 spaces away from me. I realized then that he was probably waiting for me to leave. Then what would happen? Would he follow me? I figured that he probably would, so I decided not to leave just yet. We both sat in our cars for like 5 minutes. I was on my phone texting Kayla as well as the Target group chat. I told them about the creepy guy, but Kayla didn't respond right away because she was still working. Not knowing what else to do, I decided to go back in the store. I got out of my car and then quickly walked towards the entrance. The man did not get out of his car or follow me. He stayed there. I went inside Target, just walked around for a while, and talked to a few coworkers. Then I came across my coworker David, who was a cart attendant. He was helping a customer with a TV, and when he heard about the guy, he said that he would come out and see what his problem was. David was a big guy, and as a cart attendant, he worked out in the parking lot all the time. So after he finished helping a customer, he left the store with me. We both walked out to my car, and the man was still there waiting for me to leave. David made a beeline going straight for him. He walked right up to the guy's driver's window and knocked on it. I saw the man in the car look super uncomfortable. David was basically pounding on the guy's window, demanding he roll it down. I remember David was calling him a scumbag and stuff. He was like, "Hey scumbag, roll down your window, I gotta talk to you." When the insults started, the man went into action. The guy quickly put his car into drive and just sped away, quickly leaving the Target. I was glad that he was gone. David was like, "I don't know why he didn't want to talk to me." I thanked him for his help, and then I left and went home. I never saw that guy again, but it still creeps me out knowing that he might have followed me home. Earlier in the night, I had told him what time I was getting off that night and things like that. I hadn't known that the man was acting creepy towards Kayla and maybe even others. Overall, that was the craziest Black Friday that I worked at Target.
Well, that's it for this video. Hope y'all enjoyed 4 true Home Alone horror stories animated. Shout out MJV Animations. They did a good job on the animations, but these stories, it's just crazy, man. It's just crazy, and they're true. That's what it's it's just, you gotta be aware of your surroundings, man. You just got to. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed. I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.